The slap echoed louder than the music. For a brief moment, even the orchestra stopped playing. In the heart of the city's most luxurious hotel ballroom, where golden chandeliers hung like frozen suns and the air smelled of expensive perfume and champagne, time seemed to collapse into a single, shocking second. Hundreds of guests turned their heads at once. Conversations died mid-sentence. Laughter vanished. Glasses froze halfway to lips. At the center of the room stood a woman in a deep green designer gown, her hands still raised in the air, fingers trembling, not from regret, but from rage. Her perfectly styled hair was pulled into an elegant bun, her diamond earrings catching the light as she breathed heavily. Across from her stood a man. He didn't shout. He didn't step back. He didn't even touch his face. But everyone could see it. A red mark bloomed slowly across his cheek. That man was Daniel Carter. To the crowd, he looked painfully ordinary. A plain black suit. No flashy watch. No loud confidence. The kind of man people glance at and immediately forget. The kind who blends into the background at events like this. A guest whispered, "Is that her husband?" Another replied softly, "Yeah, poor guy." Daniel's eyes dropped to the marble floor beneath his polished shoes. He adjusted his tie slightly, as if the world hadn't just cracked open in front of him. The woman, however, had no intention of calming down. Sophia Carter had never learned how to whisper. She was admired in business magazines, feared in boardrooms, and envied at social events. A senior executive at Atlas Global, she carried herself like someone who believed the room owed her attention. And tonight, she was furious. "You embarrassed me again," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the stunned silence. Heads leaned closer. Phones subtly shifted. "I told you not to follow me around like a shadow," she continued, louder now. "Do you enjoy making me look small?" Daniel remained silent. That silence only fueled her anger. She stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound cruel instead of chaotic, but still loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Look at you," she scoffed. "Standing here like you belong. Do you even understand where you are right now?" Around them, the elite of the city watched. CEOs, politicians, influencers, investors. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked entertained. Some looked away, pretending not to see. No one intervened. Because no one wanted trouble at a charity gala. Daniel swallowed hard. He could feel the sting on his cheek, not just from the slap, but from something deeper. Years of swallowed words. Years of choosing peace over pride. Years of letting silence speak for him. Sophia mistook that silence for weakness. "You're nothing without me," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "I brought you into this world. This lifestyle. These people." A nervous laugh escaped someone in the crowd. Another guest whispered, "She didn't have to do that." But Sophia didn't care. She had spent years climbing ladders, stepping on toes, crushing anyone who dared challenge her authority. And somewhere along the way, she started believing that power gave her permission to humiliate. Even her own husband. Daniel finally looked up, not at Sophia, but at the crowd. Faces full of judgment, curiosity, assumption. They had already decided who he was. A weak man, a dependent man, a nobody. He felt the familiar urge rise inside him. The urge to explain, to reveal, to correct the story they were all writing in their heads. But he pushed it down. Not tonight. Sophia noticed his calm and mistook it for surrender. She laughed bitterly. "Of course you won't say anything," she said. "That's what you're best at. Staying quiet while I do the real work." Her words hung in the air like poison. Daniel took a slow breath. This gala wasn't just another fancy event. It was a fundraiser for community housing, hosted in a building that had once been nothing but an abandoned warehouse, before millions were quietly invested to restore it. No one here knew that Daniel had signed off on those funds years ago. No one knew he had chosen anonymity over applause. Sophia certainly didn't. She turned away from him, already dismissing his existence. "Don't stand near me," she said coldly. "People might think we arrived together." That sentence hurt more than the slap. Daniel stepped back, giving her the space she demanded. The music resumed hesitantly. Conversations restarted in hushed tones. But the energy had shifted. People kept glancing at Daniel. Some with pity, some with judgment, some with curiosity. Not one of them realized that the man they had just watched being slapped in public was the very reason this event existed at all. The chandeliers above them shimmered. The walls whispered history. And somewhere deep inside Daniel Carter, A quiet decision was forming. He had stayed silent long enough. What Sophia didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that this slap wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. To Sophia, Daniel wasn't a mystery. He was a mistake. At least, that's how she had come to see him over the years. They hadn't always been like this. When they first met, Sophia was ambitious but uncertain, sharp but still finding her place in the world. Daniel, on the other hand, had been calm in a way that felt grounding. He listened more than he spoke. He never tried to impress anyone. And strangely, that had drawn her in. Back then, she used to say, "You make everything feel steady." Daniel worked mostly from home, spending long hours on his laptop, taking calls late at night, often stepping into another room when business conversations got serious. He never complained, never explained, never made promises he couldn't quietly keep. Sophia didn't ask questions. She didn't need to, at least, not then. As years passed, her career exploded upward. Promotions came fast. Titles stacked one after another. She moved from manager to director and eventually to senior executive at Atlas Global, one of the most powerful corporations in the region. With every step up, her confidence grew louder. So did her ego. Sophia learned how to command attention, how to dominate conversations, how to walk into a room and make people straighten their backs without saying a word. Power suited her, and she loved the way it made others respond. Daniel stayed the same, and that started to bother her. At corporate dinners, Sophia would glide across the room in tailored dresses and sharp heels, greeting investors and executives by name. Daniel would follow a step behind, hands relaxed at his sides, face neutral. When people asked him, "So, what do you do?" he would smile politely and say, "I manage things." That answer drove Sophia crazy. Manage what? She would think. Why can't you just say something impressive? She wanted a husband who boasted, a man who dropped titles, someone who made others feel small just by speaking. Instead, she had Daniel. Quiet, observant, invisible. Over time, admiration turned into embarrassment. Embarrassment turned into resentment. Sophia began correcting him in public, then interrupting him, then dismissing him altogether. "You don't need to speak," she would say with a tight smile when he tried to add something to a conversation. "I've got this," she'd say, without even looking at him. Daniel never argued. He never raised his voice, never reminded her of sacrifices, never defended himself. And that silence, rather than calming Sophia, only made her angrier. She mistook restraint for weakness. At home, the distance grew wider. Sophia came home late, energized by deals and applause. Daniel was usually already there, cooking, reading, or working quietly. He asked how her day went. She answered briefly, sometimes not at all. In her mind, she was carrying the world. In reality, she had no idea who was truly holding things together. Daniel handled finances without drama, managed investments with precision, solved problems before they ever reached her. When things went wrong, he fixed them silently. When things went right, he let others take credit. That was his nature, not because he couldn't speak, but because he chose not to. Sophia never noticed. She was too busy measuring worth by volume. So when the charity gala arrived, Sophia already felt on edge. It was one of the most high-profile events of the year. Executives, media, donors, everyone who mattered would be there. She needed everything perfect, including her image. Daniel accompanied her, as always. Same black suit, same calm demeanor, no attempt to shine. At their table, surrounded by executives and social elites, Sophia was already performing, laughing louder, speaking sharper, commanding attention. Daniel reached for his glass of water. His elbow brushed the table. A single drop spilled. One drop, barely noticeable. But to Sophia, it was everything. She felt heat rush to her face. Not here, she thought. Not tonight. In her mind, that tiny mistake confirmed every frustration she had bottled up for years. All the time she felt she had outgrown him. All the time she believed she was carrying dead weight. The resentment snapped, and the slap followed. It wasn't just anger. It was history exploding in public. The crowd froze. Some guests looked away, pretending to adjust their watches or sip their drinks. Others watched openly, eyes wide with shock. A few exchanged glances that silently said, "This is uncomfortable, but fascinating." No one stepped in, because in their minds, this was a private matter. A powerful woman correcting a weak man. Daniel stood there, absorbing it all. The judgment, The assumptions, the whispers forming behind hands. He could feel the room labeling him in real time. She's clearly the successful one. He must depend on her. Poor guy. Or maybe he deserves it. What no one saw was the quiet strength behind his stillness. Daniel had learned long ago that power didn't need an audience. Sophia, however, fed on one. She straightened her dress, her face hard with triumph, as if she had just reasserted control over something slipping away. In that moment, she truly believed Daniel was weak. And that belief, that single, dangerous misunderstanding, was about to cost her everything. Because the man she had just humiliated was not the man she thought she knew. The next morning, Sophia Carter walked into the Atlas Global headquarters like nothing had happened. Her posture was flawless. Her heels clicked with confidence against the marble floor. Her expression was sharp, controlled, untouchable. This was her domain. The towering glass building reflected the sunrise like a crown made of steel and ambition. Employees stepped aside as she passed, greeting her with respectful nods and polite smiles. "Good morning, Ms. Carter." "Morning." She didn't slow down. Inside, though, something felt off. The air was heavier than usual. Conversation stopped when she walked by. Assistants avoided eye contact. A few executives whispered behind their tablets, glancing up the moment she passed. Sophia noticed. She always noticed. "They're nervous," she told herself. Big meeting. Big decisions. Today's board meeting was critical. Expansion plans. New acquisitions. The kind of meeting that separated leaders from followers. She entered the boardroom, expecting the usual scene. But it wasn't usual. Executives were already seated, too early, too quiet. No casual chatter. No confident laughter. Just tense silence and rigid posture. At the head of the long glass table sat a man Sophia had never seen before. Mid-50s. Silver-streaked hair. Perfectly tailored suit. Calm, authoritative presence. He wasn't smiling. Sophia's brows tightened slightly. She leaned toward her assistant and whispered, "Who is that?" Her assistant swallowed hard. "That's the majority shareholder." Sophia straightened. "That's not possible," she muttered. "I've met every major stakeholder." The assistant didn't respond. The doors behind them opened again. Sophia turned, and her world cracked. Daniel walked in. Not behind her, not beside her, but toward the head of the table. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "What is he doing here?" she snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. Daniel didn't look at her. He didn't even acknowledge her presence. He walked calmly, confidently, and took the seat beside the man at the head of the table. The room went completely silent. Sophia stood frozen. Her mind scrambled for logic, for explanation, for anything that made sense. This is a mistake. This has to be a coincidence. He's probably here for paperwork, or legal support, or... The man at the head of the table cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said evenly, "thank you for being here." He paused, letting the tension thicken. "Before we begin, there's something that needs to be made clear." Sophia felt lightheaded. The man gestured toward Daniel. "Allow me to formally introduce the founder, majority owner, and controlling shareholder of Atlas Global." Sophia's breath caught. "Mr. Daniel Carter." The words hit like a collision. The room tilted. The ceiling seemed too high, the floor too far away. Sophia's ears rang. "No," she whispered. That's not possible." Daniel finally looked at her. Not with anger, not with triumph, not with satisfaction, with disappointment. The kind that hurt more than rage ever could. "For 5 years," Daniel said calmly, his voice steady and unmistakably authoritative, "I stayed silent because I wanted a marriage, not a battlefield." Gasps rippled through the room. Executives exchanged stunned looks. Some stared at Sophia. Others stared at Daniel, suddenly reassessing every interaction they'd ever had with him. Sophia's mouth opened, but no words came out. Daniel continued. "I founded Atlas Global 12 years ago. I stepped back from public leadership 5 years ago when my wife was promoted. I transferred operational authority, but I retained ownership." He folded his hands on the table. "I believe success meant supporting the person you love, even if it meant standing in the shadows." Every word felt like a weight on Sophia's chest. "I never needed recognition," Daniel said. "I needed respect." The silence was suffocating. Sophia finally found her voice. You let me believe." "I let you be yourself," Daniel replied gently. "And you showed me who you'd become." Her stomach dropped. The gala flooded back into her mind. The table, the spill, the slap. She felt dozens of eyes on her now, not admiring, not respectful, judging. The chairman spoke again. Effective immediately, all executive roles are under review, he said. Including yours, Miss Carter. Sophia's legs felt weak. What does that mean? She asked, her voice barely steady. Daniel looked at her. It means, he said quietly, that leadership without dignity is no leadership at all. The boardroom was no longer hers. The power she thought she owned evaporated in seconds. Daniel stood. I won't humiliate you the way you humiliated me, he said. But I won't protect behavior that poisons this company, or our marriage. Sophia felt tears sting her eyes. For the first time in years, she was truly seen. And she didn't like what she saw reflected back. Because the man she thought was weak had been powerful all along. And the power she thought she had was never really hers. Daniel stood slowly. The movement alone commanded the room. No shouting, no theatrics, just quiet authority. Atlas Global, he began, his voice calm but firm, was built with my inheritance and my vision. Sophia felt her chest tighten. I started this company in a rented office with 2 desks and a broken coffee machine, Daniel continued. I poured every dollar my father left me into it. I worked 16-hour days, slept on couches, missed birthdays, missed funerals. The board listened intently. I didn't do it for power, he said. I did it because I believed in building something honest, something human. Sophia stared at the table, unable to lift her head. When Sophia joined the company, Daniel said, she was brilliant, driven, kind. She reminded me why I started all of this. His pause was heavy. That's why, when the company grew, when investors came knocking, when press attention followed, I stepped back. Murmurs rippled through the room. I gave her the spotlight. I transferred operational control. I wanted my wife to shine without people assuming she succeeded because of me. Sophia's fingers trembled. I never imagined, Daniel said, his voice tightening just slightly, that success would make her forget who she was before it. The words cut deeper than any insult. One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. Daniel continued. Yesterday evening, at a public event where Atlas Global was being represented, I was assaulted. Sophia inhaled sharply. Not by a stranger, he said, but by the person entrusted to lead this company with dignity. The room was dead silent. I was slapped, Daniel said plainly. Humiliated. In front of donors, employees, and the media. Sophia finally looked up. Her eyes were glossy. Her lips parted. I didn't know, she began. Daniel raised a hand gently. This is not about what you knew, he said. It's about who you chose to be when you thought no one important was watching. The chairman cleared his throat. The board has reviewed the footage, witness statements, and internal reports, he said solemnly. And we've reached a unanimous decision. Sophia's heart pounded. Effective immediately, the chairman continued. Sophia Carter is removed from her executive position as CEO of Atlas Global. The words echoed. Removed. Just like that. The woman who once ruled rooms now stood powerless in the same room that once bowed to her authority. Sophia's phone buzzed violently on the table. She glanced down. Dozens of notifications. Emails. Texts. Alerts. Gala incident video goes viral. Atlas Global CEO caught assaulting man. Corporate scandal shakes industry. Her breath hitched. The world she had built was collapsing in real time. Daniel picked up his folder. This isn't revenge, he said quietly. It's accountability. Sophia felt her knees weaken. I protected this company from scandals for years, Daniel continued. I shielded it from my personal life, my wealth, my ownership. But I will not protect behavior that destroys the soul of what we built. One board member spoke up hesitantly. Daniel, what happens next? Daniel looked around the room. We rebuild trust, he said. We remind people that leadership is about service, not superiority. Sophia swallowed hard. For years, she had mistaken fear for respect. Daniel turned toward her. His voice softened. I loved you, he said. I still care about who you could become. But I can't stand beside someone who looks down on others. Tears slipped down Sophia's cheeks. The room didn't move. No one rushed to comfort her. No assistants. No allies. No admirers. Just consequences. Security quietly appeared at the door. Not aggressively. Not cruelly. Professionally. The chairman nodded to them. Ms. Carter, he said, we'll escort you to collect your personal belongings. Sophia stood slowly. Her legs felt heavy. As she walked toward the door, she passed executives who once laughed at her jokes, praised her ruthlessness, admired her power. Now, they couldn't meet her eyes. At the door, she stopped. She turned back to Daniel. Her voice cracked. "I forgot," she whispered. "I forgot who I was." Daniel met her gaze. "That's the real tragedy," he said softly. "Not the slap, not the scandal, but forgetting your humanity." Sophia nodded, tears streaming freely now. She walked out. The doors closed behind her. Daniel exhaled. For the first time in years, he felt both heartbreak and relief. He looked at the board. "Power doesn't shout," he said quietly. "It waits." The room understood. And somewhere outside those glass walls, the world was already learning the same lesson. Weeks later, Daniel was rarely seen in public. He returned to running the company quietly, restoring its values, focusing on integrity instead of ego. Sophia disappeared from the spotlight. Some say she tried to apologize. Others say Daniel never answered her calls. But one thing was certain. The city learned a lesson that day. Never confuse silence with weakness. Never mistake humility for lack of power. And never disrespect someone just because they don't announce who they are. Because sometimes, the quietest person in the room owns everything.